Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. We're continuing our coverage of Legacy of Destruction with an archetype that's at the forefront of a new trend. The tri-types of Beast, Beast Warrior, and Winged Beast have been around for a while, exemplified by the Tri-Brigade. The Fry types of Fish, Aqua, and Sea Serpents come up from time to time, and with the TCG release of Psychic Processor, we're perhaps seeing a new Psi-type of Machines, Psychics, and Cybers. And today's archetype continues that with a combination of Insect, Plant, and Reptile? That's not exactly what I was expecting there. Plants and insects have been working together on and off since trap tricks, but reptiles make the naming convention a tricky one. How about Archetypes? Because if there are three things that get the waterworks going for me, it's onions, beautiful bouquets, and bugs. But as odd a trio as it makes conceptually, let's see how they mesh mechanically. We'll plant the seeds of our garden to see how they grow, insect their finer details, then find some partners that scale well with our power level. It's time to begin the dark harvest with Raika Explained. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons and the fine people over at Dragon Shield. If you want to protect your cards with the strongest scales on the market that even come with their own lore while supporting the channel, use my affiliate link in the description. So what's the deal with Raika? Well, they're a series of insect, plant, and reptile monsters of various attributes all focused on providing powerful utility effects, with a focus on link climbing, growing to some truly dizzying heights at the far end of their power scale. Their names mean budding calamity, which fits their aesthetic to a T. I mean, look at them. They're all just standing there, menacingly! Raika Combos is a level 1 earth plant monster with 0 attack and defense, and you can special summon this monster from your hand by sending a Archetype from your hand to the grave, and you can only special summon monsters of this name once per turn this way. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add up to 2 Raika cards with different names from your deck and or banishment to your hand, except copies of this card, then banish a card from your hand. Also, you can't special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except Archetypes. This is the prototypical starter card for the theme, having a quick way to summon it while getting you some advantage. Even the banishing part is a big help that will come into play with our next card. Forget doing it for the vine, the creepy vine skeleton will be doing it for you. Raika Kamikiri is a level 3 light insect monster with 1500 attack and 0 defense, and you can special summon this card from your hand by placing one of your banished Archetypes on the bottom of the deck, and you can only special summon copies of this card once per turn this way. And if this card is sent to the grave as material for the link summon of a Raika monster, you can target a level 4 or lower Archetype in your grave and special summon it in defense position. Where Marikobe is our starter, Yahazu is our extender, and a pretty natural extension from it. The 2 cards you grab off of Marikobe can be Yahazu and any other Raika monster, which you can just banish. You can then return that card to the bottom of your deck to get Yahazu onto the field, and now you have 2 monsters you can use as link material. And even if you have no other targets for Yahazu's revival effect, you've got the Marikobe you used as the other part of that link summon. It's solid not only in our strategy, but in several insect decks, as we'll be banishing quite a few of our monsters for other effects. I can already think of 4 instances in B Trooper where that's going to be very relevant. It's also a really cool looking monster, but hides some pretty grotesque features. Under the armor, you can see the body is made of a bundle of wires, and while it's a lighter shade than Marikoba's, it still elicits the idea of a massive vines puppeting the body. Great, like I needed even more reason to be creeped out by bugs. Raika no Yoroi Tokage is a level 4 dark reptile monster with 0 attack and 2300 defense, and you can special summon this card from your hand by banishing a Archetype from your grave, and you can only special summon copies of this card with that effect once per turn. You can discard a Archetype to target a face-up monster your opponent controls that is not a Archetype and return it to the hand. And from there, we can see a kind of pattern forming, where Marikoba pitches a card for its special summon, Tokaga banishes from the grave for its, and Yahazu returns to deck for its summon. But this ends the cycle of getting us advantage, instead trading a card for removal, and bouncing is a pretty good way for that to take form. Hitting extra deck monsters with it is a great way to force your opponent to make it again without incurring any graveyard shenanigans, and while it's less permanent against main deck monsters, it does still get them out of the way if need be. My only complaint is that I can't quite grasp what's going on here. I can see the dark vines, much more like Marikoba's here. I can see the armor, the general 4-legged body shape, but that's about it. I'm certainly not getting any Reptile vibes from any of it, that's for sure. I'm starting to think that Reptiles got picked last out of a lineup like they were choosing people for a dodgeball team, and Reptile was the only person left. It's kind of funny in a sad, relatable way. Alright, that covers our main deck monsters. Now it's time to move on to the extra deck, which oddly enough has more cards in it. They also have a few similarities. While in the grave, you can target a Cry-type monster you control, place it on the bottom of the deck, and if you do, special summon that Link monster. But if you use any of these Link monsters' effects, you're locked into only special summoning Cry-types that turn. This makes Link climbing into huge monsters a breeze, because you can trade in any single monster for one with a massive Link rating. But this is contrasted with how limited our pool of monsters is in that regard, especially generically good ones, which is why it's so good we're getting a big boost to that pool in this set. Raika no Mushadokuro is a Link 2 fire plant monster with 1600 attack, requiring 2 monsters including a Cry-type as material, and it can target a Raika monster in your grave and special summon it in defense position. Yep, we've got more extension, and it works beautifully with the cards we've talked about so far. If you make this with Marikobe and Yahazu, the warrior insect can bring back the Skull Vine, then Dokuro can revive Yahazu, and now you have 4 Link material off of what was only a single card. Sadly, because this can only revive Raika monsters, you will need to have that infrastructure for this to do anything, but because of how powerful they are, I expect that won't be much of a problem. What is a problem is that the possessing tendrils now have a glowing sword, and I'm wary of magical objects radiating otherworldly light on the best of days. This is just nerve-wracking. Raika no Ugami Nushi is a Link 3 Wind Insect Link monster with 2300 attack, requiring 2 or more monsters including a Cry-type as material. And it can banish 2 Cry-type monsters from your grave to add a Raika trap card from your deck to your hand. Now, at time of recording, we only have one, and it's fine. But a free card is a free card, and we're still gonna make great use of this as part of our Link climbing. So it's good that it comes with some kind of bonus effect. And in future releases, I'll be praying for some good updates. Raika no Kusarigami is a Link 4 fire reptile monster with 2900 attack, requiring 2 or more Cry-types as material. If your opponent activates a monster effect, you can activate this effect, keeping both players from activating monster effects in the hand for the rest of the turn. So it's a hand trap floodgate. A Drollin Lockbird style hand trap floodgate to be precise. That is so odd, and I honestly don't know how I feel about it. The aforementioned Droll is a pain in my hiney, but most other hand traps are good for the health of the game, giving players an avenue to interrupt their opponent they usually wouldn't have. This also has a bunch of other applications, like any monster who has a special summon from hand effect that's activated, searchers like Dragoonity Remus and Mikanko Uhime. It's honestly kind of terrifying, especially since this, like all of our other Raikas, can crawl out of the grave by trading in an on-field Cry-type. Time will tell if this ends up being an effective countermeasure to hand effects, weighing them down like the old ball and chain. A ball and chain that's attached to a sweet sickle. Raika no Daioga is a Link 5 Earth Insect monster with 3300 attack, requiring 2 or more Cry-types as material, which means no more using non-Cry-types. You've got to stick to the theme. And if any number of monsters are special summoned from the opponent's deck or extra deck, you can destroy 2 monsters on the field. So we basically have a big monster that retaliates against summons right out of the decks. It's no negation per se, but removing them before they can pose a threat to you is probably the next best thing. Keep in mind though that you have to pop 2 monsters, not up to 2. So a savvy opponent can make you trade a card instead of taking out 2 of theirs. This is a fantastic top end to your plays. While it doesn't have a proactive effect, its attack stat will clobber the opposition, and keep any strong monsters from flashing in out of nowhere to take it down. It's good to have such a reliable insect warlord at our side. It's like some kind of beetle trooper. Never mind, that name will never catch on. Alright, that does it for the monsters. Now it's time for the spells and traps. Raika Ryorin Kuruizaki is a continuous spell card, and while on the field, all Cry-types on the field gain 300 attack and defense, and all other monsters on the field lose that same amount. And once per turn, you can either add a Raika monster from your deck to your hand, then discard a card, or special summon a Raika monster from your hand, grave, or banishment in defense position. Not much to say here aside from this being a really solid piece of support, either changing a card in your hand into a Raika, which will fill up your grave, or getting back a Raika you have in rotation. This works especially well for the decks teching in the engine, because now you have another way to access the support and bridge the gap between the types. Also, it'll make for the silliest mirror matches in the game. You cannot convince me otherwise. I hope we see a huge resurgence of Cry-type decks in the meta for this interaction alone. Raika Dairin Kubikarimai is a normal trap card that targets cards your opponent controls up to the number of Cry-type link monsters you control with different types, and destroys them. If any number of Cry-type monsters you control are destroyed by a battle or card effect while this card is in your grave, except the turn this card was sent to the grave, you can banish this card, then target a monster your opponent controls, and destroy it. This is basically an extension of Ugami Nushi, our Link 3, giving us removal based on how developed our Link setup is. This definitely means that Raika works best with our constituent decks that Link summon, as opposed to the ones that focus on other summoning methods, but thankfully, Links being as generic as they are, this shouldn't be a huge problem for most decks to adapt to. If you have 2 or more, this is already a pretty fantastic option, especially because it can hit any card your opponent controls, and while in the grave, is more retaliatory removal. It's okay, but I'm certainly looking forward to seeing what other trap cards will be added to the game, and how Ugami Nushi will develop alongside them. It might actually calm it down a bit too, because right now its blades are vibrating so much from anticipation it's causing shockwaves. Breathe! Breathe! Alright, now that we're familiar with our cards, let's learn a little combo. I'm going to show you how to make our distinguished Link 5 with just one card, Marikobe, which is good because there's a lot of ways we can search it. Ryorin filtering it into our hand, Lone Fire Blossom summoning it out, 1 for 1, all that jazz. You don't even need a discard to special summon it, this combo is completely self-contained. Summon the Marikobe, using its effect to get Yahazu and Ryorin, banishing the Yahazu. Play the Ryorin, and use its effect to summon the Yahazu. Alternatively, if you had to use Ryorin to get Marikobe, search Yahazu and Yoroi, banishing the reptile. Then, special summon Yahazu using its own effect, tucking away the banished Yoroi. Link off your 2 monsters for Musha Dokoro, and now, because you used Yahazu as material for the link summon of a Raika monster, you can use its effect to bring back Marikobe, and you can use Musha's effect to bring back the Yahazu. Now, link the Musha and Marikobe into Ugami Nushi. From here, you can banish 2 Cry-types from your grave if you have any to spare, but you'll need to at least keep Musha in the grave, because it's going to take the Yahazu and put it under your deck to revive itself. Now you have a Link 3 and a Link 2 Cry-type, so you can mash them together to make Daioga. And now you can punish your opponent's summons from the deck. And you've still got those extra cards in hand, so this could easily extend to a point where you have enough material in grave to banish with Ugami Nushi to get that trap card, or extend into any of your preferred deck types. The world is your oyster. No, oyster's wrong. We're not dealing with fry types here. The world is your garden? So that's all the Raika cards, but what do we do with them? Well, having looked over all the cards, the deck doesn't really have a win condition other than make big monster and punch real good, which isn't so much a win condition as a neutral state in Yu-Gi-Oh decks. It's clear that these are very much meant to operate as support for Cry-type associated decks. The only question is, which decks does this work with best, and do we get to have any fun crossovers because of it? So, part of the reason why Reptile felt like such an odd man out was because Insect and Plant were actually already collabing long before this. Off the top of my head, we've got Naturia. Most of their recent decks have been combinations of the Plant and Insect ones, making some truly heinous control boards. And there's also Trap Tricks. Those have been Insect and Plant since the very beginning. And with their recent pivot to Monster Link combos, it feels like Raika is gonna fit right in. But there were also a bunch of free agent cards that also combine the 2 types. Beargrim is an awesome dragon ruler that does a lot of stuff. Circle of the Fairies gives both types an extra normal summon. Diabolantis, the menacing mantis, is a great way to fill up your grave, and Fariant is synchro support for both. Honestly, if you had left Reptiles out, I never would have batted an eye. As for individual types, let's start with insects. Bee Troopers are the latest of the group, and all the banishing Raika does pairs very well with their lesser used support, giving us a chance to recycle them with monsters like Heavy Bee Trooper Mighty Neptune. I also like that we have a Link 3 and Link 5 insect, so we can use them to get out from under the insect lock our Bee Troopers put us into. letting us pivot back into our other two types. We've also got Yahazu helping to recur our level 4 and lower members with their effects intact, so we can get more buggy activations. As for other insect helpers, Praying Mantis can turn our continuous spell into a way to punish our opponent for attacking, as well as a way to generate several tokens for more summons. Infinite Antlion is a strange reactive scrap dragon hand trap deal, Dragon Bite gives us synchro support, and funniest of all, Humongous Hive Hegemon Zex Stagger for the free insect every end phase. For plants, I actually don't think they need the help quite so much. Decks like Rika Sun Avalon already have a smashing time of it as is, though with their most recent hits on the ban list, that might be changing. In fact, with clever usage of our Raika Link monsters, we can actually return our limited Dryas and Healer back to the extra deck so we can keep using them. Yahazu may also be able to help get a monster back out from the grave while recycling one of our banished monsters to get more value out of them. One option in particular being Cattycorn, which can search Con when special summoned if you don't have a card in the field zone yet. And last but not least, we can also link our way up into Sun Avalon Drya Trentier, which can in turn get us Sun Avalon Bloom, which in turn is a giant monster negate that gives this otherwise zero attack Link monster some oomph. Reptiles probably benefit the most from having a generic support pool because they are just not getting the love they need. Ogdoadics are currently the front-running theme to take advantage of the engine, and with all the cards you send to grave here, this is the theme to break Snake Rain after all, it's not hard to see why. Not only do we have revival from grave, but also token generation, and with all that raw material, you can turbo out your links like nobody's business. They also play very well with Ogdo Abyss, because we're going to be summoning a lot from the grave, and those aren't going to be hit by that board wipe. It's very funny. As for a silly tech pick, well, this is also probably going to be standard practice for the theme, but it is too funny not to be here. Serpentine Princess. This old card has the most bonkers effect trigger I've ever seen, needing to be returned from the field face up to the deck to summon any level 3 or lower monster from your deck. But, because it's a reptile, we can use it as a way to reborn our links, which gives us a free summon from our deck when we do that. Even if the archetype you splash in has no level 3 or lower monsters you want to summon, you always have Marikobe, which is basically just a free search and setup. And the fact that we get to use this card from Legacy of Darkness from all the way back in 2003 as a legitimate power play is fantastic. I love Yu-Gi-Oh! Alright, that's all the info I have about Raika, but how does it stack up against the Nova scale? Novelty. While I wouldn't say the triple type grouping is getting old, I still feel like there's plenty of room for more. The inclusion of reptiles does feel a little forced. If anything, it's the aspect of the trio I feel isn't really expressed in the art very well. The big draw is the perpetual presence of your Link monsters, always ready to trade in something innocuous for a big body that has some utility, and as long as it's within the 3 types, is a big boon in terms of Link climbing. So, for its unique spin on a tried and tested formula, Raika get a 3 in novelty. Objectivity. This one is going to be hard to gauge because I feel like Raika's only limitation is imagination. For instance, you can overlay 2 level 4s to make Rika Queen Strenna to recover a plant monster, then tribute it for the summon of an Ogdoadic from your graveyard to summon yourself a Hyperiton. We are looking at the dawn of some truly immaculate combos, but at the moment, because of that Cry-type restriction, it's not seeping out into other decks and causing the next gold rush towards a ridiculous win condition. Raika gives a broad range of monsters a wide range of tools, but nothing too oppressive, I hope. So Raika gets a 5 in objectivity. Versatility. By their nature, they're meant to work in a lot of different decks. While we only have 3 types to work with, we're casting a pretty wide net with them, so this is an easy 3 in versatility. Awesomeness. The art and flavor for these cards is stupendous, but I don't know, a theme built entirely for the sake of propping up others is helpful, but it's hard to get excited about them. Especially because if even one busted combo gets discovered, it's really going to sour the whole idea. Centralizing this theme meant to provide diverse support across a variety of archetypes into 1 or 2 play sequences that makes everything else painfully suboptimal, inevitably leading to its banning, destabilizing the whole core. And even if that doesn't happen immediately, it's only a matter of time. So with that in mind, I'm giving Raika a 3 in awesomeness, meaning this theme gets a 14 out of 20 on the Nova scale. And that's all I have to say about Raika. This theme is going to make for a lot of sweet decks in the future, and while the Ogdoadic variant is picking up, finally, I'd be surprised if it was the only deck that picked up that momentum, and I have a feeling we've only just begun. The calamity before us is only in its early phases, and I shudder to think what will happen when it reaches its full bloom. A Link 9 monster! But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are Raika about to turn these 3 types into tryhards, or were the 3s crowded out? And which one's your favorite? I'm really vibing with Dialga. It's got that same helmet as Oryumon, it totally slaps. Let me know your favorite down below, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode is brought to you by my patrons, as well as the wonderful people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using the coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. Today's episode was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commanders Sir Knight JCB and the Critic of Innocence, Nebula Navigators 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Andrew Newman, Kane Senpai, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Dark Dragon X830, EmonyChan, Eric, Aaron the World Breaker, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Carp, Mana Charge, Marion James E. Picata, Mega Combi, Millennia Asta, Muzuki Clark, Nathan Vig, Natiel Lee Alexander, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Serenity Towns, Skybuster Leo, That One Dumbass and the Wizard Moose, Cosmic Crusaders Alpha Sly, Almento 5010, A Random Pup, Ariel Kersey, Beluga Masta, Blitzwolf, Blue Gem, Borger with a Shotgun, Callum McCann, Jazz Ghost, Childish Lamar, Dr. Reaper RIP, Drachenwald, Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Ignis Heat the True Draco Slayer, Inblink, Jester Designs, Jordan Vick, Kale the Dragon, Keyvon Public, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh, Kim Smiley Face, Lemon Yu-Gi-Oh, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Manga Pages, Marluxia's a Girl, Matt Simmons, Mick Spoofy, Michael Shimabukuro, Misty, Nitromo, Shizuki Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Stephen Williamson, Taylor Seymour, the legendary Raven, and Zal Dreka, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits and other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you would check out the link to my Patreon in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you'd like to see a video about the original Tri-types, check out this video where I talk about Tri-Brigade. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.